Students, today we are going to discuss about another new topic in your 9th class biology, that is about animal tissue. Here we need to discuss about different varieties of tissues present inside the animal body. How like a plant body is made up of 4 major types of tissues. In the same manner, the animal body is also made up of 4 major types of tissues. What are that? Epithelial tissue. The first one is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, and the last one, nervous tissue. And in today's class, we are going to discuss about another tissue, that is epithelial tissue. Okay. What is meant by epithelial tissue? Here the word epi indicates outermost. Epi means outermost. And tissue. What is meant by thelium? Thelium means tissue. Epi, outermost. Thelial means tissue. Thelium means tissue. The outermost tissue is called as epithelial tissue. Then what is the main function of this epithelial tissue? The epithelial tissue, it just involves in protection. Okay. How like a plant body is made up of many layers from outside, in the same manner the animal body is also protected by many outer layers called as skin. Okay. The main function of epithelial tissue is protection. And the next function of this epithelial tissue, the epithelial tissue is made up of thin cells which are arranged very closely, compactly they may arranged. And here in the epithelial tissue we are unable to find intracellular spaces, as the intracellular spaces are absent in the epithelial tissue. It just acts like a barrier. It just acts like a barrier. And it, in some parts of our body, it is made up of a single layer. And in some other parts of our body, it just made up of many layers. Many layers. Okay. As it is not containing any intracellular spaces, it's just acting like a barrier, and it is also capable to allow only certain substances. That's why it is also having the power of selectively permeability. They are very selectively permeable as they are present outer parts of our body and a lining of inner organs. Okay, and this epithelial tissue is just separated from other tissues by the help of a fibrous filament. A fibrous filament. Okay, depending on the function and location of epithelial tissue, it just divided into 3 types. In that, the first one is squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, squamous epithelial tissue. And the second one is columnar epithelial tissue. The second one is columnar epithelial tissue. And the third one, cuboidal epithelial tissue. And now just have a look on this squamous epithelial tissue. What is meant by squamous epithelial tissue? Okay, where it is present and what is the function, how it appears. If we talk about the structure, the cells of squamous epithelial tissue is very flat and there is no intracellular spaces. If you want to know the location of a squamous epithelial tissue, here see, it is present inside the lung. Okay, the alveoli. What is that? Alveoli. The structural and functional unit of lungs is called as alveoli. If you see the structure of alveoli, it just looks like a small sac. Okay, our lungs, they may contain numerous these sacs, alveoli. That's why we call this one as structural and functional unit of the lung, as it is involves in a function of gaseous exchange. What is the function of alveoli? It involves in a function called as gaseous exchange. It is made up of a single layer. Okay, single layered squamous epithelial tissue just lines the alveoli. That's why it is capable to done its function very easily. That is gaseous exchange, carbon dioxide out and oxygen in. And we also find this squamous epithelial tissue in the lining of blood vessels. The blood vessels also lined up with squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, if we talk about the next part, that is esophagus. The esophagus. You heard the word food pipe. Is it right? Food pipe is also called as esophagus. The esophagus is also lined with a layer of squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, and it is also present in the inner part of our mouth. Our mouth, inside our mouth, is also lined up with squamous epithelial tissue. It is very delicate. I already told you. While we are eating, we may find while we are eating any bones or any hard materials, sometimes we may get hurt. Why we are getting hurt? Because the squamous epithelial tissue is very sensitive or delicate. Okay, that's why while we are eating, sometimes inside the inner layers of mouth, sometimes they may get some injuries. Okay, if we talk about the skin is also made up of squamous epithelial tissue. Here you people may get one doubt. What is that doubt? If it is made up of squamous epithelial tissue, it is very delicate, no? Why don't we get injuries very easily? Though it is made up of squamous epithelial tissue, it is present inside the skin in many layers. The squamous epithelial tissue is arranged in many layers inside the skin. And such variety of squamous epithelial tissue is called as stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Okay, inside the mouth, it just appears like a delicate layer, but inside the skin and the outer part of the skin also made up of squamous epithelial tissue, but it may present in many layers. That's why we are getting protection from outer environment. Okay, and such variety of epithelial tissue which is present in many layers is called as stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Then what is the main function of this squamous epithelial tissue? Nothing but giving protection to all these parts. It is giving protection. If we talk about the next one, columnar epithelial tissue. Columnar epithelial tissue. Then what is the location of this columnar epithelial tissue? If you find the structure of columnar epithelial tissue, all the cells, they just looks like a small pillars, small columns. Okay, that's why we gave the name columnar epithelial tissue. And here you people find one thing, they just present inside the intestine. The intestine is made up of columnar epithelial tissue. It just lined with columnar epithelial tissue, and the respiratory tract also made up of columnar epithelial tissue. Okay, then what is the main function of this columnar epithelial tissue? It involves in two functions. One is absorption and another one is secretion. Absorption and secretion. Here, if we talk about absorption, the intestine, what is the main function of small intestine? Absorption of nutrients. The food, it may contain many nutrients, and that nutrients will be absorbed by the intestine. That is done by columnar epithelial tissue. If we talk about respiratory tract, the respiratory tract, it just inside the respiratory tract, the columnar epithelial tissue, it just contains some hair-like structures. The surface of columnar epithelial tissue inside the respiratory tract, it contains small hair-like structures, and those structures are called as cilia. Why it contains cilia? Because inside the respiratory tract, the mucus, it has to move forward. In order to make the mucus to move forward, the columnar epithelial tissue is made up of some cilia, and this variety of columnar epithelial tissue is called as ciliary columnar epithelial tissue. Ciliary columnar epithelial tissue. As it is containing on its surface cilia, we call them as ciliary columnar epithelial tissue. And where we are able to find such variety of tissue? Inside our respiratory tract. Inside our respiratory tract. If we talk about the last epithelial tissue, that is cuboidal epithelial tissue. Cuboidal epithelial tissue, it just contain the cells which appears like cubes. Okay, they may arrange in this manner, and we are capable to find this cuboidal epithelial tissue inside our kidneys, and the kidney tubules also made up of this cuboidal epithelial tissue. And the salivary glands which are present in our buccal cavity is also made up of cuboidal epithelial tissue. Then what is the function of this cuboidal epithelial tissue? The main function of cuboidal epithelial tissue is secretion. It involves in secretion. Okay. By hearing the word secretion, you may understand that many body parts, they just involve in function of secretion of different substances like hormones, enzymes and other chemicals, certain types of acids, they may release. Okay. And here the kidney and the salivary glands, they need to secrete certain hormones. That function is done by this cuboidal epithelial tissue. And certain parts of our body, here the cuboidal tissue is just capable to form a gland. By folding inwards, the cuboidal tissue, it itself folds inwards and form a multicellular gland. Okay, here the cuboidal tissue, it just fold inwards and also involves in the function of forming multicellular glands. Okay, and the glands also capable to secrete certain hormones. Okay, is it clear? This is about different types of epithelial tissue and their location, function. Okay, I will meet you with another new topic. Till then, stay curious and keep learning. Thank you.